career spanning half a century, guitarist and singer Del McCoury has earned recognition as a living legend of bluegrass. McCoury, who fronts a band featuring his sons Ronnie on mandolin and Rob on banjo, came to national attention in the early 1960s performing with bluegrass pioneer Bill Monroe. Preview's editor John Mark Raffis speaks with McCoury about why he decided to perform with Preservation Hall Jazz Band. McCoury reminisces about his introduction to bluegrass through the recordings of banjo picker Earl Scruggs. He also talks about the similarities between jazz and folk music and how the genres have enriched one another.
I understand that you originally recorded with Preservation Hall in 2009 when they were doing a recording for a fundraising effort of theirs. What made you want to record with Preservation Hall?
Well, I'll tell you what, John. My distributor, my record, I have my own record company, and my distributor is Sony Red in New York City. So they called my manager and wondered if I would be interested in going down and singing a song with the Pres Hall Band, for that benefit record. And I told, and so Stan said, now I'm just going to lay this out in front, and if you don't want to do it, it's okay. If you do, it's fine, So I said, I'd like to do that. I'd like to do that. I think I sang 3 songs, and I think they put 2 of them on the record. So that's how we got acquainted, and then, of course, we got to talking, and we thought, why don't we get both bands together and see what they would sound like together, just an experiment. So I think we played Jazz Fest in New Orleans, me and my band, that is, sometime later, and we set it up where we'd go over to the Preservation Hall and play with those guys and just see what it sounded like. So we decided, okay, we're just going to do a record.
I spoke recently to Ben Jaffe of Preservation Hall, and he said that when he first met you, it was one of those feelings where he felt like he had an instant rapport with you, and one of the reasons why he thinks he felt that was because you're so similar to his father. He described it as the two of you were cut from the same cloth. You and Ben's father were born just 2 years apart, and not that far apart geographically. His father was born and raised in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, and I understand that you were born in York County.
That's true. Mm-hmm. A lot of my first playing that I did was in Baltimore. We played those clubs because Baltimore was a big bluegrass town in the 50s and the 60s. A lot of my kinfolks, they moved from Western North Carolina up there to Baltimore to play to work, during the war. They brought their music with them, and my dad's people all played old time music, like banjos, fiddles, but they were from the mountains down there in Western Carolina, they were Mitchell County, and so I guess that's kind of where I got my music from. But actually, I never learned from my dad. I learned from my mother, and my mom, she played piano, and she taught my older brother guitar chords, and I learned from him,
And you started playing banjo, but you made a rather important switch to guitar when you met Bill Monroe.
Yeah, I'll tell you what happened there, John. My brother taught me to play guitar, I think, when I was about 9. He would sing, and he wanted somebody to play with him because he was a good guitar player and singer. Played on the radio in Hanover, PA there. But he he was older than me, and he could afford to buy records. So he bought, now this is back when the 78 RPMs were still in, and he bought a record of Flatt and Scruggs, and when I heard Earl Scruggs play that banjo, I thought, man, this is what I got to do. So I started learning to play, even though I didn't have a banjo. We borrowed one, and then I think when I got out of high school and got a job, I bought one. I bought a new one in Gettysburg. There was a music store there, and they had Gibson instruments, and I bought a brand new Gibson banjo, and I just took it from there. I played banjo I played it for about 10 years. And my first job, my first date with Bill Monroe was on banjo. He needed a guitar player and a lead singer, and I wound up doing that,
What were some of the challenges of combining your band with Preservation Hall, coming from 2 different genres?
I think the biggest thing was to get the balance between the acoustic instruments and the horns, in the studio and on stage. So our sound, we got two sound guys. I've got my own sound guy, and sometimes he can't go, but they have their own sound guy in New Orleans. But both those guys really learned fast how to mix them on stage, you know, how to mix the two on stage. And so I think that was the biggest challenge, actually, as far as the songs. And I got to tell you this little story. When we first got together to try some things between the two bands, you know, my son Ronnie, he said to those guys, he said, "Did you ever play a tune called Muhlenberg Joy?" And I said, "Oh yeah, that's it. Oh, Jelly Roll Morton wrote that song." And Ron told them the story then about Bill Monroe, that Bill Monroe was in the hospital in the middle 50s, and he had a bad car wreck, and he spent some time in the hospital. And of course, back then they didn't have TV in hospitals, but they did have radio. And so he heard this jazz number on the radio, this, they call it Muhlenberg Joy. And so anyway, like 20 or 30 years later, I mean, he didn't record it. He heard it, and he just recorded it from memory, but not for 20 or 30 years. I don't know why he waited that long, but he did.
That is amazing. Well, obviously it stuck.
It stuck, you know. The only thing was there was a chord change in there that was a little different than the original, but it wasn't that far removed from the original thing, you know. So they just started playing that right away. Ronnie mandolin, and they played the horns, and so we recorded that one.
You've played with an awful lot of great musicians in your career. You've recorded with Steve Earle and with the band Fish, and of course with Bill Monroe and others. What sort of things did you learn from these jazz musicians that was new to you? Did you learn anything new that you felt, wow, you know, I've been doing this for, 50 years and this is news to me?
Well, you know, I'm not sure that I did learn anything new, because years ago, you know, I realized in the beginning now, when I first started playing bluegrass when I was just a kid, you know, and I thought, well, there's no other music like bluegrass. But as the years went by, I grew to realize, you know, all this music is related. It's all akin. Bill Monroe learned things from jazz when he was pretty young, you know, because people told me he used to go to New Orleans and stay there for a couple of weeks and listen to people, which I didn't know, you see. But anyway, then later in life now, when Bill Monroe is famous, and he's on the Grand Ole Opry on 50,000-watt clear channel radio, okay, now I'll tell you who's listening to Bill Monroe, and they're starting their own music. Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, and the Blue Suede Shoes guy, what was his name? Carl Perkins. Those guys were playing on their electric guitars. They were playing the same notes that Bill was playing on the mandolin, because they were listening to the Grand Ole Opry when they were a kid, like they were roughly my age, you know. And Bill Monroe's like 20 years older than them, and he's already famous and playing an opera. And Chuck Berry used to come to the Grand Ole Opry at the Ryman Auditorium, and of course, because he was black, and this is the Deep South, they wouldn't let him in, you know. So he had to sit on the back steps of the Opry and listen from outside, and he would hear Bill Monroe playing those downbeat things on the mandolin, you know. And that's where he got Johnny B. Good. That's where he got them licks from, you know. So the music just keeps going, and it's all akin. It's all related, you know. And the singing is the same thing, you know. Bill Monroe learned a lot of his songs from Jimmy Rogers, you know, and of course a lot of it's amazing, a lot of the jazz tunes came from country or old hillbilly. You know, they had me record Jambalaya, and they do that a lot in jazz, and I didn't realize that, but it came from Hank Williams. Hank Williams wrote the song, you know, and he was a big country star on WCM on the Grand Ole Opry, and they do quite a bit of country, old country stuff, you know. They established it in the jazz world, you know. So yeah, it was actually pretty easy to record, you know. It's a natural fit, yeah.
Tickets are on sale for the Dale McCurry Band and Preservation Hall Jazz Band together in concert, September 28, 2012 at Penn State's Eisenhower Auditorium. Order online at www.cpa.psu.edu or by phone at 1-800-ARTS-TIX.